Christmas is coming. And you're probably wondering, hey, where are those cute little cards I should be handing out to my friends? Well, it's 2016, so we thought we'd bring the invitations online. We've come up with a little video that we'd love for you to share on Facebook. Here, take a look. So we're thrilled for our Christmas Eve services, and we hope you join in. Now, with Christmas landing on a Sunday morning, we're going to encourage you to stay home. Spend some time with family. Maybe invite some friends over. Either way, it's a skip day. Now, New Year's Day is also landing on a Sunday morning. But that's not a concern for nice folk like you, is it? Okay, here's the plan. On New Year's Day, we are having one service at 11 a.m. Childcare will be provided for kids up to age 5. Come join us.
Indoor playground continues every Thursday from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. in the gym until December 22nd. This is a free casual drop-in session where you can let your kids burn off some energy. Also, starting January 5th, during indoor playground at 10 a.m., we'll be adding a free exercise class. I'll be leading some Pilates-inspired movement that incorporates strength, core, and stretching. It's post-baby friendly and all abilities are welcome. So bring your exercise mat and we'll exercise away those January blues while our kids play.
Christmas dinner is coming early. It's going to be here in the church lobby on Thursday, December the 8th at 12:30. So, if you're over 55, you're welcome to join us here for turkey and all the trimmings. It's just $10 at the door, so you could probably bring a friend along. And we're also collecting mitts and socks for the Bridge Ministry on 20th Street, so bring along a pair of those if you can. You'll need to sign up at the newsstand or call the church office before Tuesday, December the 6th. Don't be late. We need to know how many turkeys to roast.
So those are your announcements. For more information, head to the homepage of lakeviewchurch.com.
The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, a one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous from inside to out, true from start to finish. Around the years 90 to 110, the gospel writer John publishes these words because he believes that he has seen the Son of God, God himself, move into the neighborhood. And the words that he chooses are loaded. He wants to signal something to his first audience. So the actual words he uses in the actual original text is this, that God pitched his tent with his people, which is a trigger word for them. It's going to pull them back to one of their beginning stories, the wilderness wanderings, where God's temple was sort of like a pop-up tent, a pop-up temple. And this was the place they believed as they traveled along that God dwelt and met with his people. So time moves on, and later Israel settles down, and they build a more permanent structure. But by 70 AD, Rome grinds that temple into dust. So the question on the minds of these first century Jews is this: well, now what do we do? Now where do we meet with God? Where do we see God? Where does God hang out? Where can we go to find God? Because you see, for the Jews, the temple was a place where they would meet with God. It was the place that God promised that he would make his home. The temple was a place where heaven and earth would come together. It was the place you went to hang out with God. It was the place that you would celebrate festivals and parties to celebrate what? To celebrate God's love and to celebrate his presence. But what John is saying here, and what he later implies, is this, that Jesus somehow thought that he was a replacement for the temple. So instead of interactions with God happening under one specific kind of roof, now they were happening within a person. So then Jesus isn't the kind of temple that you go to. Jesus is the kind of temple that makes house calls. Like that time, 5,000 hungry people needed something to eat. You remember the story. It goes like this. That one of the disciples, it was Andrew, brother to Simon Peter, said, "There's a little boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but that's a drop in the bucket for a crowd like this." And Jesus said, "Make people sit down." There was a nice carpet of green grass in this place, and they sat down, about 5,000 of them. And then Jesus took the bread, and having given thanks, he gave it to those who were seated. He did the same with the fish, and all ate as much as they wanted. And when the people had eaten their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the leftovers so nothing is wasted." And they went to work and filled 12 large baskets with leftovers from 5 barley loaves. John sets this passage up. He frames it by saying that this story, this episode, actually happened in and around the time of Passover. Well, what's Passover? Passover is a reminder. Passover is a rehearsal of God's provision. It's this festival where a lamb was slain, his blood was spilled. It's a festival where they would meet in homes, look after one another, eat together. They would eat flesh and drink wine, all to remember, to commemorate, but also think ahead too and celebrate how God had released the people of Israel from bondage. And who's in bondage in this story? It's the 5,000. Now, this is probably 5,000 men, so we can maybe assume that, let's say, they've got spouses, so that's 10,000. Let's say they have maybe 1 kid each, roughly. Let's say there's at least possibility that there's 15,000 people that Jesus is looking after here. How is it possible that 15,000 people go out for a picnic with no food? How is it possible that they have nothing to eat? Remember the setup. Remember all the times we've talked about how Rome ran their business. If you're going to conquer the world, you're going to need money. And the best way to get money is to squeeze the people who are already under your thumb. So there's a war tax. You can't pay it. You mortgage your property. They hike the interest rates 120%, 150%, eventually to the point where you can't even afford to be on the land that you already owned. So what happens then is that the empire gathers everything that you have. If you're lucky, you can maybe work the land that used to be in your family's name for generations and generations. But what it does is that it leaves you to a place where you have nothing, where you are hungry, where you are pushed to the outskirts. You're living on the edges. And so Jesus has compassion over these people. He feels for them. Why? Because he's one of them. His family, his people have felt that same strain. And notice, if you look at Jesus' lunch diary, who he's hanging out with, it's always the outcasts. It's always the losers. It's always the misfits. It's always those who are on the edges. Yet he feeds them. And at the end of the day, they have even more food than what they started with. And again, this is a very important detail that John is giving us, and here's why. There was a Roman custom at the time to make sure that you always made way more food than you needed for a meal, so that you would have leftovers at the end, so then you could say and all could witness, look how amazing Rome is. Rome's taken over the world. Things are so good right now that there's leftovers. We don't even know what to do with all this food. And that might have been true for the rich, the powerful, the leaders, and the elite, but it most definitely was not true for the 5, 10, and 15,000 who have been squeezed out and go out for a picnic and have nothing to eat. So Rome is putting on some sort of smokescreen, but Jesus speaks right into that and says, pick up the leftovers. Look how much is left over in God's kingdom. So what he is actually doing is that he is undoing what Rome has done. Jesus, the temple who makes house calls, the great provider and healer, brings wholeness and health, and he repairs the damage done by the empire, by the very ones who created these outcasts and misfits and hungry people in the first place. So where does that take you and I? Hopefully right here. Henry Nouwen says, that. I'm going to back that right up. Right here. It was very dramatic. This is going to be an amazing quote. So here we go right here. Henry Allen says, more and more, the desire grows in me simply to walk around and greet people and enter their homes and sit on their doorsteps and play ball and throw water and be known as someone who wants to live with them. It is a privilege to have the time to practice the simple ministry of presence. Still, it is not as simple as it seems. My own desire is to be useful, to do something significant, or to be part of some impressive project is so strong that soon my time is taken up by meetings and conferences and study groups and workshops that prevent me from walking the streets. It is difficult not to have plans and not to organize people around an urgent cause and not to feel that you are working directly for social progress. But I wonder more and more if the first thing shouldn't be to know people by name, to eat and drink with them, to listen to their stories and to tell your own, and to let them know with words, handshakes, and hugs that you do not simply like them, but that you truly love them. So what does all this mean for us? Here's where I think it's headed. For you and I who are part of Lakeview Church, if you've been here for the last 4 or 5 years, or maybe if you're sort of new on the scene, there has been an evolution of our approach here and how we want to be and do church. And we want to move away from a Christianity that simply and only says, my job is to convert you and convert the masses. And instead, we want to adopt a Christianity that says, my aim is to open my life to you, to walk with you, to be present with you, to carry your hurts and burdens, to celebrate you, to grieve with you, to welcome you into my life, to welcome you into my home. Because it's there that we believe, that in those intentional moments, that God's Holy Spirit does His transformational work. So as we talk about these things during this season of Advent, and Advent is this season of expectation, perhaps for some of you, it's also going to be a season of expecting company. So we're fusing these Advent stories with something that we're unpacking here as a church. We talked a little bit about it in September. We've alluded to it since then. And maybe when you walked in this morning, right at the front doors, you saw that big 4x8 poster with the title Neighborhood Churches. This isn't a new program that we're rolling out. It's not a campaign. Instead, this is a practice that we want to adopt. That what would it mean if for us as Lakeview Church, if our homes were actually churches in our neighborhoods, meaning our homes would be open to take people in, to spend time with people, to love them, and not any sort of weird bait and switch, but to love them just because Jesus loves them, to feed them just because Jesus feeds them, to walk with them understanding that when you walk shoulder by shoulder close to someone, that is the kind of Christian life that you and I are being invited into. And it's nothing spectacular. This isn't just for the special people. This is normal stuff for normal people, normal Christians. And this morning, in this latter half of the message, I'm going to bring somebody out here in a minute to talk about how she has adopted this practice for over 40 years, not as a guilt trip to you, but as an encouragement in saying, wait a second, if she can do it, maybe I can do it too. Watch this video.
Hi, my name is Gloria Reimer, and I am absolutely amazing, as many of you know. I've been around life for quite a while. I'm going to be having a birthday in another couple of weeks. I'm going to be 69 years old. I grew up on a farm which was close along the American border, and we would often jump the fence, in those days you could, and say we were in another country and that we had been that we were world travelers. Met my husband to be, Jerry, in high school. He was this big hunk of a guy with blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and everybody said, oh, that Jerry Reimer, he is the guy. We dated for about 5.5 years and eventually decided either we would go our separate ways or we would stick it out together. And we have been sticking it out together for 47.5 years. Well, into this marriage came 2 children. Our oldest daughter, Tamara, was adopted. We got her when she was 13 days old, right from the hospital, and so it's never been that she hasn't been our girl. Then we had a little surprise come our way, and we had Matthew. They are now 39 and 36. Tamara and her husband lives in Hawaii, and Matt and Jessica live in Anchorage. So you know what these parents do. We do a lot of traveling. I grew up in a really amazing home as I look back. Living in it at the time wasn't great. I was never a morning person, but there was something that everybody had to attend on every morning at 7 o'clock, and that was morning devotions. My dad had the gift of teaching. He was a self-taught theologian. So that whole innate theological love that I have for scripture and theology does come from my dad. Over the years, we found my dad would have a lot of men working for him in the farming area that he had, and he would always invite these men in if they wanted to come and listen. They would come early, and there they would sit and hear the Word of God explained in very practical terms of how you could live it. Dad was a man of integrity because what he said was always followed up with deeds. One of the men that were working for my dad, their house burnt down. And so my dad just automatically invited them in to our home. I mean, he fed them, he gave them housing, they had a little baby. And so for that whole winter, they lived with us. I just think it's so important that we broaden our sense and our understanding of hospitality and remove it from this whole area of entertainment, of bringing people in your house and setting out a 7-course meal. I think there's a great point of bringing people into your home in that regard. But there's a whole bigger picture out there that we can practice and do hospitality. For me, hospitality is very different from entertainment. Hospitality is one of the spiritual gifts that is found in the whole list of spiritual gifts that we have, which gives it a high priority. It also is a command that Paul gives us: practice hospitality. And I think that we have mixed those two, and that we feel that hospitality is entertainment, in that it's bringing people into our house. When our house is spotless, we have the china on the table, we have the best meal, and we sit down and we entertain. Now that can be a small part of hospitality, but hospitality is much bigger than that, and it is much broader, and it's making people feel welcome. It's embracing each other. It's looking outside of ourselves, and I believe includes sacrifice on our behalf, so that when we are looking at hospitality, we are looking at embracing community, family, people from other countries. It is so broad, and we don't want it limited to this entertainment idea that we have, and that it is much broader than that. So we only have not only a gift, but we have a command to practice hospitality and to reach out to people that are suffering in any way. They don't have any food in their house. They don't have a place to stay. Maybe they need a place to hang their head for a week and they stay 10 years. We don't know. We never had limits on how our home would be open.
Will you join me in welcoming Gloria Reimer this morning? Now, I gotta make a confession to you right now. So, Gloria is the kind of person that I would say politely invades your personal life space. So, I had maybe known Gloria for a week, and there was a Sunday, and I'm in the lobby, and I'm talking to somebody, and then someone comes and just grabs me around the waist. Like, really close, like uncomfortably close. Now, in my house, growing up with brothers, if someone did that, you know what the first reaction was? Yeah, an elbow right in the head. So you need to know that you were seconds away from getting an elbow in the head. But I'm so glad I didn't, because that would have been an awkward start to our...
black eye.
Yeah, black eye, awkward start. So Gloria is here this morning because as I begin to find out who she was and how she and her wife Jerry were handling their lives... Husband. Did I say wife?
Yes.
Husband. Yeah. Husband. Really nice beard, though, right? You see the beard on that
Yes,
guy?
that was awesome.
Yeah, that was an awesome
Absolutely.
beard. There's a certain way that they were practicing hospitality. And later she told me that she has been doing this kind of thing for over 40 years. So I want her to share a bit of that story. So why don't you start us off with talking about, so this started happening where you watched your dad practice this. Why did you carry this on in your life? And why was that important to you?
Well, growing up, as you heard in the video, growing up in a home, giving was a given. But the giving was not out there. It was a lifestyle that my dad embodied in everything that he did. And I'll just give you another example. We lived out on the farm, and so every Saturday we would go into the town of Morden to get groceries. And I could never figure out why we always stopped at the Weeb's place. And I thought, well, we don't really visit, we really don't do anything. We just stop for a little while, and then we go home. Well, it wasn't until later that I realized that as we bought groceries for ourselves, Dad was delivering groceries to them every Saturday. Now, he didn't get into the car and say, oh, isn't this great that we're giving? My dad never, ever, ever spoke about the whole area of giving. He just lived it. It was his lifestyle. There was not a farmer in the community that didn't know that if their machinery broke down, that if they went to Harry's place, he would stop whatever he was doing and fix their equipment first. And so I grew up with this whole environment of just helping others, being there for others, but doing it in a way that wasn't noticeable. A lot of these things we didn't know till after Dad had passed away. And people would come to us, many people, and say, your dad helped me here and your dad helped me there. So for me, it wasn't even a big decision that I made that one day we would have a home where we would have people come in and stay and do whatever. It was just a continuation of a lifestyle that I had already been part of in growing up. And so when Jerry and I married, it was just sort of a thing that came into, it just came natural. Jerry also came from a home with a large family with lots of giving. And so, the first people that came into our lives were a couple of girls, and that was over 40 years ago. And I have no idea how many people over those years that we have had in our home. So you think about what did we learn, or what did I learn over these 40 years? I think the biggest thing that I learned was that it is not about fixing people. It was not my job to fix people. I don't know whether the saying here that Henry Nouwen, that Joe just read a little while ago, basically sums it up. My responsibility as a kingdom dweller is to love, to accept, to embrace, to respect, and to enter into the story of the people that come into our home. That doesn't mean that we don't do anything to help, we do. And our desire for our home, Jerry and I, is that when people would walk into the door, that they would feel a sense of refuge, that they would feel a sense of peace, that they would feel a sense of acceptance. And I truly hope that over the years that we have shown that to many, many people as they have come into our home, in our door and out, whether it could be for, like I said, for a weekend or end up being 10 years. We've had both. And then we talk about passing it on to our children. Well, actually, our son Matthew actually took that literally because my husband would go down often to wake him up to go to work. And he always had to make sure that he was not minimally dressed. he had to make sure that he was covered up because we never knew how many kids would be downstairs in the family room. And Matthew said to me, you know, Mom, he said, my friends all knew that if they needed a place, that my bed was available. Now, they didn't come in the front door and they didn't come in the back door. They came in his window. So needless to say, we had a lot of people or kids in our home. But I think passing it on to your children is very important by what you do. It isn't about talking, it's about doing and including them in as you bring people into your home, or even other ways of doing. There's so many ways that we can pass it on to our kids.
Well, let me hold you right there, because 40 years is a long time. And, you know, there's people that come and visit with you for a night, for a meal, or a hangout, and then some who stay for many years. So bring us into a couple of stories. When have things worked out? And by worked out, you say, you know what, we were there, good things happened, success story. And then maybe share with us a story where you were present, you did what God asked you to do, but things didn't work out the way anyone had hoped. And maybe tell us a bit where God was in both those stories.
Well, I believe that God isn't into results. God is into the process of loving and accepting and becoming. And in fact, I'll talk about those first two girls that came into our home over 40 years ago. One was Gwen, and they had grown up on a farm, and they were coming to go to university. And their mom was a little bit nervous about these young girls coming to school and wanted them to be in a safe place. Yep. So they came and lived with us for 2 years. In that process, Gwen met this nice young man across the street who are good friends of ours and also attended the same church that we did. And to make a long story short, they dated, married, and we had the privilege of just this last October seeing them again when we went back to Brandon for a wedding. And we sat across the table from them and had this amazing conversation as these two kids, I call them, have spent over 30 years in Pakistan with Wycliffe, translating the scriptures into Kurdish for the people there to be able to read the scriptures. To me, they're still our kids, but what an amazing story. That would have never happened if we had never opened up our home. We've opened up our home to many people who have struggled with mental illness, with depression, with anxiety. We just had a young girl that lived with us for the last 10 years who struggled with anorexia. And the ending of her story wasn't at all what we had wanted. In the end, we had some wonderful good years with her. She's lived with us for 10 years. We encouraged her, we loved her. We did everything we could to help her along that journey. But in the end, she decided there wasn't any hope left, and she took her own life. And those are the times that you sit back and say, was it worth it? But yes, it was. We instilled in her, and we loved her. We accepted her. We brought her into our home. She became part of our family. And every day, as we invested in her life, was worth it. Was God in it? Absolutely. But in the end, we become the vehicles of the Holy Spirit. And in the end, the people that come into our home, they make their choices. Sure. And so we can't control what people do or how they receive the care we give. We just give it unconditionally and pray that they will make some good choices. And understand that God is there no matter what. I used to always say, you know what, you can't get away from God's love. You can run as far as you want, but it's always there. He's always going to get you.
Fair enough. And I like the distinctions you made between it's not your job to fix people, but to love people. And you also said, well, this isn't necessarily about entertaining, it's about hospitality. Talk to us a bit more about that. Talk to us a bit about what sacrifice means. Tell us how you feel about empty bedrooms. And then what's it like living with an introvert and also having people traipsing through your house? Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, my poor husband, introvert. There's I have a little bee in my bonnet about entertaining and hospitality. Hospitality is a spiritual gift, and it is to love strangers. And what it is, it talks about that we are there to but encourage people to be valued and to feel loved and to feel accepted. It's to help them to make connections with other people. It's there to make them feel that they are part of something and that they are not alone. Entertainment is, we put on this big dinner party, which is great. Some people can do it, I can't. Put on this great big party, and it's to show what we have. Hospitality is bringing people in to share what we have. And so this whole area of hospitality is not about showmanship. It's about accepting, it's about encouraging, and it's about bringing people in that necessarily aren't the most lovely. I think we have a responsibility to help those who maybe don't have the same benefits as us. And the whole empty bedroom thing is, I have sort of this thing I often watch on TV, or I hear people talking about, oh, they're pro-life and, you know, the whole abortion issue and all of that, and I agree with all of that. And then we go home to our lovely homes where we have 2 or 3 empty bedrooms. And we forget about those poor young women who are destitute, who have nowhere to go, who have nothing to eat. They're the desperate ones who are going to have abortions because they have nothing. And we are not willing to sacrifice our lovely home with its empty bedrooms where we could easily take in a young woman and help her through that transition. Do we do that? We feel bad about people who maybe don't have a place to live. Oh, it's so sad. We should pray about that person. You know, they don't have any place to live and they don't have any food. Well, you know what? Take the $20 out of your pocket, like Jerry says, buy them some food, and bring them into your home. Maybe it won't be for a week, it may be 10 years, we don't know. But I have this idea of that we talk great, but then we go home to our wonderful homes that are basically empty and sit back and think we've done something wonderful. Do I have a bee in my bonnet about that? Yes, I do. And so when people ask me, why do you do what you do? I believe that you've got to put your feet where your mouth is. And so if there is somebody that is in need, I need to open my home, and I need to be willing to sacrifice my personal space. Now, this is much more difficult for my introvert husband than it is for me. And sometimes he would say, you know, there would just be some days I'd like to walk around my house in minimal clothing. I said, well, Jerry, there will come that day when you'll be able to do this. So anyway, yes, it does take sacrifice. It's not easy to have someone in your home, and it's not easy to always have somebody that is maybe in your personal space. It's difficult. But you know what? I mean, I don't believe we're called to live life easily. I think we're called to live life in real ways and in helping people as much as we can.
Amazing. Got one last question for you, and as you answer it, I'm going to invite the band to come forward, and those helping serve communion, if you can take your places as well. This is your last parting shot to Lakeview Church. Challenge, encouragement. What would you say to your community as the choir and band come out and communion people come forward?
Be intentional. Look and listen. There are people all around you that are hurting. And especially at this Advent season, make sure that you have somebody added to your Christmas dinner. There are so many lonely people out there that don't have a place to go. Matthew, when he was young, used to say, Mom, are we having all those people with the black hair coming? And I'd say, black hair? Anyway, we always used to have exchange students. So they'd be from Singapore, Taiwan, and they would have the shiny black hair. So it was the people with the shiny black hair. I mean, sometimes we'd have 25 people at our Christmas dinner. And you know what? They really don't care whether it's, you know, a high-priced turkey or whatever. The fun we would have. There's single moms who sometimes don't have their children. There are single people all over that need a place to stay. I don't think there's hardly been a Christmas that we haven't invited people in. You know, be intentional and listen, and quietly, don't overtly, quietly say, do you have a place to go this Christmas? Would you like to join us? It is It will just benefit your heart, it will benefit your family, and it'll benefit you. And through the year, listen, somebody will say, you know what, my money didn't reach to the end of the month. Go and buy them a Safeway grocery card and slip it in their pocket. There are so many ways, but you have to be intentional and you have to listen.